Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're new here, pull up a chair. This is the place where we take a stack of dense, complex, and, well, sometimes downright revolutionary sources, and we do the heavy lifting for you.
We do. We read the papers, we parse the theories, we scour the archives.
And we try to extract those nuggets of gold so you don't have to spend weeks, or in this case, maybe years, in the library.
Think of it as the ultimate shortcut to being the most well-informed and maybe, just maybe, the most provocative person at your next dinner party.
Exactly. And today, okay, I know I say this a lot, but today is genuinely different. Usually we're talking about, I don't know, the latest shifts in global economics or maybe some obscure historical event.
Right. Manageable topics.
Manageable. Today, we are doing something else entirely. We're going to be talking about a theory that rewrites the map of the world. And while we're at it, rewrites the map of the human soul.
We really are. And that's not hyperbole. This isn't just a history lesson. This is a full-on paradigm-shifting exploration that touches on linguistics, theology, ancient geography, and the very structure of reality itself.
It challenges pretty much everything conventional history tells us. Where holy sites are, how our language even works, and how we understand our fundamental relationship with the Creator. It's a lot.
It's a huge amount to take in. And because this topic is so massive and, frankly, so far outside the mainstream narrative, we need to be very, very clear right from the jump about where all this is coming from.
Right. This is critical. We aren't just pulling this out of thin air or connecting dots ourselves. Today's deep dive is based entirely on the works, the lectures, and the discoveries of one person.
That person is Dr. Khaled Waleed.
And all of this information is coming from his Almighty Covenant YouTube channel. In Arabic, that's Mithaq al-Kalek.
Yes. So it's important for you, the listener, to understand that throughout this entire discussion, when we say the source argues, or the theory states, or the text suggests,
we mean Dr. Khaled Waleed's work. We are specifically reporting on his worldview.
Precisely. We are exploring his specific universal and structural formulation of the relationship between the creator and the created. He has a very distinct, very rigorous methodology for decoding scripture that, as you said, challenges almost everything else out there.
So our job today is to be your guides through that specific framework.
Yeah.
Think of us as impartial reporters walking you through a very different kind of library. We're not taking sides. We're not endorsing or condemning.
We're just opening the book.
We're opening the books. So, with that said, what's the mission for today? What's the roadmap for this deep dive?
Well, first we're going to unpack Dr. Waleed's theory of the circle of mercy. It's this fascinating geometric way of looking at human behavior and spiritual status.
Okay, the geometry of the soul. I like that. What's next?
Then we move from the soul to the soil. We're going to look at what he calls the great geographical shift.
Which is the polite way of saying the source argues humanity has been looking at the wrong map for centuries when it comes to holy sites.
That's one way to put it. Yes.
And after that,
we dive into language. We're going to decode some absolutely mind-bending linguistic secrets. We'll see how Arabic scripture, according to Dr. Waleed, might actually connect to English idioms you use every single day.
Like feeling blue or blacklisting someone.
Exactly those. He argues that they aren't accidents of language, they're echoes of a deeper truth.
It is truly fascinating stuff. So one final disclaimer before we jump in. We're your guides. We're reporting on the text and arguments presented by Dr. Waleed. Our goal is to present his framework as clearly as we can.
And with that, shall we step into the circle?
Let's do it. Section 1, the geometry of the soul. So Dr. Waleed introduces this core concept called the circle of mercy, or in Arabic, Dayarat al-Rahma. I want to help you, the listener, visualize this. If I'm closing my eyes, what am I actually looking at here?
Okay, imagine a target, just a standard archery target. You've got the bullseye right in the center, you have a middle ring surrounding it, and then you have that large outer ring.
Simple enough.
Dr. Waleed uses this exact geometry to explain the spiritual state of every single human being. And to him, this isn't just a metaphor. He sees it as a structural reality of how we relate to the divine.
So every single person on the planet falls into one of these three zones.
Every single one. There's no fourth option, no stepping outside the target. You're always in one of the three rings.
Okay, let's start where everyone wants to be. The bullseye, the center. This is the goal, right?
This is the absolute goal. This is the circle of mercy. And in the source material, this is defined as the path of the straight, or Sirat al-Mustaqim.
The straight path. I've heard that phrase before.
Right. It's the ideal state. But here's where it gets really, really interesting, and where Dr. Waleed's analysis starts to diverge from more conventional theological explanations.
How so?
He draws a unique structural parallel here between God the Lord, or Rab in Arabic, and parents.
Parents.
Parents, who he calls the lords of the family.
Wait, unpack that for me. He's directly linking how we treat our mom and dad to our standing in this divine circle.
Explicitly. It's not a side note. It's central to the whole structure. And it all comes down to the definition of the word Rab.
Which we usually just translate as Lord.
Exactly. We say Lord of the worlds. But Dr. Waleed argues that Rab implies much more. It implies a nurturer, a sustainer, an educator, someone who raises you up from nothing.
Okay, that makes sense.
God is the ultimate Rab, of course, the Rab of everything, but on earth, in your immediate life, your parents are your Rab. They're the Rab of the family. They nurture you, they sustain you, they raise you.
They're your immediate source of life and care. The first ones you know.
They are. So the source argues that the people living in this center circle, the bullseye, the circle of mercy, they are defined by a very specific behavior, and that behavior is Ihsan.
Ihsan. I know that one. It means excellence.
Right.
Or beauty in action, right?
Yes, excellence and profound kindness. But in this specific context, it is Ihsan directed towards the parents.
So it's not just about abstract faith or praying in a corner somewhere by yourself?
No. This is a crucial point in Dr. Waleed's entire framework.
Yeah.
You cannot be in the center of the target. You cannot be on the straight path. You cannot be close to God if you are disconnected from or disrespectful to the lords of your family.
So the people in the center, he calls them the close ones.
The close ones, yes. And they are defined by how they treat their parents with tenderness, with a soft wing of humility. They don't say "uff" to them.
Oof. You mean that sound of annoyance? Like
Yeah.
a teenager sighing?
Exactly that sound, that little puff of air that dismisses everything they just said. The source references the Quranic verse that forbids even saying "uff" to parents. The people in the center, they just don't do that.
It's the smallest sign of disrespect, but he's saying it's a signifier of your entire spiritual state.
It is. Because they maintain this Ihsan connection with the parents, the source argues they therefore maintain their connection with God. The logic is crystal clear. If you cannot honor the visible Rab who raised you,
How can you possibly claim to honor the invisible Rab of the universe?
you can't. The terrestrial reflects the celestial. It's a structure.
That puts a tremendous amount of weight on our family dynamics. It's not just psychology, it's theology.
It is. And he even gives this soul map a geography, a physical location.
Right, you mentioned that.
He links this state of spiritual mercy, being in the center, to a specific place on earth, a place called Baka.
Baka.
He describes Baka as the land of light and truth. Now, we'll get into the explosive details of where Baka actually is later on, and I'll give you a spoiler. He says it's absolutely not where you think it is.
Okay, intriguing.
But for now, just hold that thought. Being in the center spiritually is linked to being oriented towards Baka geographically.
The bullseye of the soul is tied to the bullseye of the world.
A perfect way to put it.
Okay, so that's the center. That's the goal. What happens if you take a step out? You're not in the bullseye anymore, but you're not on the outer edge either. You're in that middle ring.
That is the circle of confusion. Or you could call it the circle of error. Think of this as the border zone. It's a gray area. It's not the pure light of the center, but it's not the total darkness of the outside either.
Who lives here? What kind of person ends up in the circle of confusion?
These are people who are described as lost or drifting. But, and this is the absolute key to this circle, the connection isn't severed yet.
Okay, so the line is still open.
The line is still open. Dr. Waleed points out that people in this circle might still be praying. They might still go to the mosque or church. They identify as believers. They maintain a connection, however fragile or frayed it might be, to the source, to the parents.
So to use the family analogy, they haven't been kicked out of the house. They're just, I don't know, sulking in their room.
Exactly. They're still in the house. It's a place of drifting. Maybe you aren't treating your parents with that perfect Ihsan we talked about. Maybe you're neglectful. Maybe you're making major mistakes in your own life, but you're still there. You still answer the phone when they call, even if it's grudgingly.
And the source says this is a place of opportunity. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it makes sense in this framework. It's an opportunity because the connection still exists, because the door is still open. You can still return.
You can fix it.
You can apologize. You can correct your path. You can step back into that bullseye. It's a state of flux, of potential. It's not a permanent condemnation. It's a warning.
But then there's the outer ring,
Yeah.
the final circle, the danger zone.
That is the circle of anger.
That sounds ominous. Final.
It is intended to be. This is the zone of the excluded. The Arabic term is al-maghdub alayhim, those upon whom anger is brought down.
Wow.
In Dr. Waleed's framework, this is a state of total separation. If the center is connection and the middle is a frayed connection, the outer ring is disconnection. The cord has been cut.
What does that mean in practice in the parent analogy?
Here, the parents, and by structural extension, God, no longer look at or speak to the individual. The phone call stopped. They don't even argue with you anymore. They're just silent.
You know, that hit me so hard when I was reading the notes for this. The idea that parental silence, not yelling, not scolding, but that cold, complete silence when a parent just gives up on you, is being equated here with divine wrath. That is genuinely terrifying.
It's a profound psychological and theological insight, isn't it? The silence is often so much heavier than the screaming. The anger is expressed through total removal.
It's the ultimate rejection.
It is, and Dr. Waleed describes this as the moment the entity, the person, changes state. They change from being Rahim, which means merciful, or being an object of mercy, to being Rajim.
Rajim, which means what?
It means outcast, or more literally stoned, the one who is pelted with stones and driven away.
Rahim to Rajim. That leads us perfectly into the next part of this, because it feels like Dr. Waleed is building this entire theory not just on theology, but on the very bones of language itself.
It is the linguistic code, absolutely. And this is section 2 of our dive. He zeroes in on that specific pair of words, Rahim versus Rajim.
To an English speaker, they sound pretty similar. Rahim, Rajim.
They sound similar, and in Arabic script, they look very, very similar. It's a tiny change in a letter. But the difference in meaning is quite literally the difference between heaven and hell.
So Rahim, let's start there.
Rahim is an attribute of God. It means the merciful. It comes from the root RHM, which is connected to the word for womb, Ram. It's about mercy, connection, life, nurturing. It's everything in that center circle.
Okay, the womb, the source of life, and Rajim.
Rajim is the attribute of Satan. He is al-Shaitan, al-Rajim, Satan the stone, the outcast. It's the opposite of the room. It's rejection, expulsion, being cast out into the cold.
So structurally, in this framework, paradise is for the Rahim, for those who live in that state of mercy.
Correct. Paradise is for those in the circle of mercy who embody that connection. And hell, or the fire, is for the Rajim, those who've been cast out to that outer ring of anger and disconnection.
It's so symmetrical. But then he takes it a step further. He brings in the word criminal. Now, usually when I hear the word criminal, I think of someone, robbing a bank or stealing a car, a legal definition.
Right. A civil crime.
But in this source material, criminal, mujrim, means something very, very specific.
This is where his linguistic root analysis gets absolutely fascinating. Dr. Waleed points out that the Arabic word for criminal is mujrim. The 3-letter root is JRM.
Okay, JRM. Got it.
Now, think back to outcast, or Rajim. The root letters are RJM.
RJM. Wait a second. JRM, RJJM. It's a mirror image. The letters are just swapped.
It's an anagram, a perfect letter swap. And Dr. Waleed argues this is absolutely not a coincidence. He says it's a built-in code in the language.
What's the code telling us?
The code is that a mujrim, a criminal, is by definition someone who follows the Rajim, the outcast, Satan. To follow the outcast is to become a criminal. The words themselves are telling you this.
So crime, in this specific theological framework, isn't just breaking a civil law, it's a spiritual alignment. It's choosing to follow the outcast into the outer ring.
That is exactly it. And the source goes on to argue that criminals in the Quran, the mujrimin, are synonymous with polytheists, or mushrikeen.
Okay, but again, he defines polytheism in a very specific way here. It's not just about worshiping a golden statue, is it?
Not at all. In his framework, polytheism is defined as following the Gog and Magog deviations. We'll touch on who they are later, but the core idea is that you commit polytheism by following the path of the outcast, which leads you away from the true center. You follow the Rajim, you become a mujrim.
The wordplay, the anagrams, it seems to be absolutely central to his entire method of interpretation.
It's because Dr. Waleed views the language of the Quran as a structural mathematical code, not just as a vehicle for telling stories. He believes the meaning is baked into the letters themselves.
Which brings me to the blue discovery. I have to say, out of everything in this incredible document, this is the one that really made me just put my coffee down and stare at the wall.
It is a genuine mind-blowing connection, yes.
I read this part of the source 3 times just to make sure I was getting it right.
Let's talk about it. Section 3, decoding blue and salt.
Okay, so Dr. Waleed is analyzing a verse about the Day of Judgment. It's from Surah Taha, verse 102. The line says, "We shall gather the criminals on that day." And then there's a specific word describing them. How is that word usually translated?
The word in Arabic is zuka. And you're right, conventionally, traditional translators have really struggled with it. They usually land on blue-eyed or sometimes even blind.
So the interpretation is that people are resurrected with, what, physical blue eyes? Or with cataracts?
Yes, it's often seen as a physical description of the bodies on that day. A bit strange, and translators have debated it for centuries.
But Dr. Waleed says, hold on. Forget the literal eyeball color. Look at English.
Right. This is the leap. He links the Arabic word zurka directly to the common English idiom feeling blue.
Feeling blue. As in, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm in a state of tribulation and calamity.
Exactly. The source argues that the verse isn't describing their eye color, it's describing their state of being. The criminals are gathered on Judgment Day feeling blue in a state of absolute heavy depression, calamity, and terror.
Okay, but let's just pause on the implication here. That implies that the Arabic Quran from the 7th century is anticipating and using a concept embedded in an English idiom that wouldn't even exist for another 1,000 years. Is that the claim?
That is precisely Dr. Waleed's point. He posits that the Quran possesses a universal tongue. He doesn't believe language is a series of historical accidents. He believes the scripture encompasses human expression across time and across cultures.
So feeling blue isn't just some arbitrary English phrase we came up with?
He would argue that it's a linguistic echo, a preserved fossil of a Quranic truth about the state of the criminal soul on the Day of Judgment. The knowledge was embedded in the scripture, and it surfaced in English centuries later.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it really makes you rethink the nature of language itself. It suggests language isn't random, it's designed.
It suggests there's a blueprint, and he does the exact same thing with the concept of salt.
Right, the ring of salt. I've seen this in, a dozen supernatural movies. The characters pour a circle of salt around themselves to keep ghosts or demons away.
It's a very common piece of folklore, a widespread superstition. And the question is posed, is there any truth to this? Does it work?
And Dr. Waleed's answer is a hard no.
A very hard no. He identifies this practice specifically as an Israelite distortion, a corruption of an original truth.
A distortion of what exactly?
Of words, again. He argues the true spiritual protection is not a ring of salt, but the circle of prayer. The Arabic word for prayer is salat.
Wait, salat.
Salt.
Say them out loud. Salat, salt.
They sound almost identical.
They do. And that phonetic similarity is identified by Dr. Waleed as the very mechanism of the distortion. He argues that you take the true concept, encircling yourself with prayer and connection to God, and you corrupt it by changing one sound. The true protection is salat. The distortion is salt.
So you keep the sound of the word, but you completely gut the meaning. It's like a cargo cult. That's a perfect analogy. You're just left with the empty ritual. He argues that throwing sodium chloride on the floor does absolutely nothing to stop a spiritual entity. The real protective ring is the constant connection to the divine through salat.
He contrasts this with the closing of piety, right?
Yes. He brings up the story of Adam and Eve. What's the first thing Satan does? He tempts them, and their clothes fall away. They are left naked and exposed. The source says our protection, our spiritual clothing, is piety. It's a state of being, not a condiment from the kitchen.
Piety, not a condiment. That really does sum it up. Okay, so we have covered the map of the soul. We have covered the code and the language. Now we have to move the physical map. This is section 4, the great geographical shift.
And this is, without a doubt, the most radical and controversial aspect of Dr. Waleed's entire body of work. If you thought the linguistic connections were heavy, this changes. Well, everything.
He is claiming that the entire geography of holiness has been misplaced by history, that we're all looking in the wrong direction.
Yes. And let's just state the core claim as plainly as possible. The source argues that Bakka, the primordial holy site mentioned in the Quran, is not a synonym for Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
So where is it?
The claim is Bakka is Jerusalem, outwards, and therefore the current city known as Mecca is not the location described in the ancient texts as the first house of mankind.
That's a monumental claim.
Yeah.
Walk us through his evidence. Why Jerusalem? What's the case for Bakka being Jerusalem?
Okay, so the Quran describes Bakka as the first house placed for mankind, a blessed place. Dr. Waleed uses a biological parallel to explain this that is really quite striking.
Yeah.
He posits that Baka was the first piece of land to physically emerge from the water during the creation of the continents, like a single island rising from the primordial global ocean.
The first dry land on Earth.
The very first. And he says it was crying as it emerged. The name Baka in Arabic is from a root that means to cry or to weep. He likens it to a newborn child, which cries the moment it leaves the womb and enters the world. The land itself cried out as it was born from the water.
That's a beautiful, really poetic image. The Earth itself crying as it's born.
It is. And he then identifies this specific location as the land of the Jebusites. The ancient name for Jerusalem was Yabus.
Yabus, Jerusalem.
And he also links the name Yabus etymologically to Jesus, suggesting a deep ancient connection there. So in his framework, Jerusalem is the center. It's the first land. It's the crying land. It is Baka. It is the bullseye of the world.
Okay, so if Baka, the true holy place, the sanctuary, the first house, is Jerusalem, then what is Mecca, the city that millions of people make pilgrimage to every single year?
This is where the theory gets very, very intense. The source identifies the current Mecca, and he often groups it together with the ancient city of Petra in Jordan as the location of the criminals.
The criminals? You mean the Mujrimun from the outer ring of the soul map?
The very same. He argues that this entire region, the desert area of modern-day Saudi Arabia and Jordan, is where the destroyed nations of the past lived. The people of Lot, of Ad, of Thamud.
These are all nations that the Quran says were destroyed by God for their corruption and disbelief.
Precisely. So Dr. Waleed's argument is that history has been inverted. People today are venerating a land associated with divine punishment.
Wait, just to be crystal clear, the argument is, humanity is supposed to be revering Jerusalem, the land of mercy, but instead, history has tricked people into circling a spot in the desert that is actually associated with divine wrath and punishment.
That is the absolute core of the great geographical shift. He calls it a deliberate historical inversion.
And this changes the story of the Prophet Muhammad as well.
Completely. He argues that the Prophet wasn't in the Hijaz region of Saudi Arabia confronting the tribe of Quraysh, as is traditionally understood. Dr. Waleed argues the Prophet was actually much further north, in that Petra-Mecca region, confronting a group called the People of Tuba, whom he identifies as Israelite groups.
This flips the entire accepted historical narrative on its head.
It does, because it means the Masjid al-Haram, the sacred mosque, is not in Mecca, it's in Jerusalem. And it means the current practice in Mecca is what the text refers to as Adar al-Dayarim.
What does that mean?
Essentially, the spinning of the circulars, or just spinning around in circles. He calls it a meaningless rotation in a desert of hell, rather than true worship in the House of Peace.
The House of Peace. Dar al-Salam.
Dar al-Salam, which he argues is the true name for Jerusalem.
Exactly. That is the true destination in this framework, the House of Peace.
Right.
And this brings up a massive question, an obvious one. If this is true, according to the source, how on earth did it happen? How do you move a holy site? How do you convince billions of people over centuries to look the wrong way? That seems like an impossible historical magic trick.
It does. It seems impossible. But Dr. Waleed has a theory for the mechanism behind it, a mechanism of social and intellectual control.
Okay.
And this brings us to Section 5, the blacklist mechanism.
The Mishnah and Gemara. Now, usually when people hear those terms, they think of foundational texts of Rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah.
The oral Torah, essentially.
That is the standard understanding, yes. But Dr. Waleed again goes back to the linguistic roots. He traces the etymology of the word Mishnah very differently. He derives it from the Arabic root shani.
Shani. You mentioned this earlier. It means to hate or to shame someone, right?
Yes. He points to a verse in Surah Al-Kawthar. Indeed, your hater, shani, is the one cut off. So Dr. Waleed interprets the Mishnah not as a book of religious laws, but as a blacklist, a list of shame.
So it wasn't a scripture, it was a tool.
A tool of political and religious control. He argues it was used by a corrupt hierarchy to control dissenters. If you didn't follow their rules, if you asked too many questions, if you challenged their authority, you were put on the Mishnah, the shame list.
And what happens when your name is on that list?
That's where the Jamara comes in. He derives the word Jamara from the Arabic root Jamara, which is linked to the act of stoning or exclusion.
So if you're on the Mishnah, the blacklist.
Yeah.
The punishment is Jamara. Social stoning.
Social stoning. You are cast out. You are shunned. You are, in modern terms, blacklisted.
So it really is a form of ancient cancel culture.
That's a very apt comparison. It is, but with immense theological weight behind it. And Dr. Waleed sees this exact pattern, this mechanism of control, being repeated throughout history. He calls it the historical chain of control.
A chain?
Yes. He identifies 3 major eras, 3 links in the chain of excommunication or blacklisting, all stemming, in his view, from this original Israelite influence.
Okay, walk us through the 3 eras. What's the first link?
The first is what we just discussed, the Mishnah Gemara phase in the Jewish context, creating lists of who is in and who is out, and punishing those who are out.
Okay. What's the second link in the chain?
He then moves to the Christian context. He links this mechanism to St. Paul and the concept of excommunication, and also to the word news, the idea of spreading news about someone to shame them, to ruin their reputation, and to cut them off from the community.
So same function, just with a different name.
The same function. And the third link. This is perhaps the most controversial take on Islamic history in his entire work. He links the mechanism to the Hadith and the Sunnah.
The collected traditions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, the bedrock of mainstream Islamic law and practice.
That's right. Dr. Waleed argues that the vast body of Hadith literature was fabricated centuries after the Prophet during the Abbasid era.
And he makes a linguistic link there too, doesn't he? With the name Abbasid.
He does. He links the name Abbasid to the Quranic word Abbas, which means he frowned or he turned away. He sees the entire era as one that turned away from the original message.
And these fabricated hadiths were created to establish what?
A parallel religion, a new system of control.
Designed to do what? The same thing as the misnamed.
Exactly. To blacklist true believers. To create a system of takfir, the practice of declaring another Muslim a non-believer, an apostate.
So just like the Mishnah list, the hadith collections became a new, much longer and more complex checklist to see if you were compliant.
Precisely. And if you didn't follow the thousands of rules in these books, if you questioned their authenticity, you were a heretic, you were outcast, you were subjected to takfir.
So in his view, takfir isn't a new phenomenon. It's just the latest iteration of the ancient Mishnah blacklist mechanism.
It's the same software running on a new operating system. And what's the ultimate goal of this control system? It's to keep people away from the true sanctuary in Jerusalem.
How does it do that?
By distracting them. By burying them in thousands of pages of detailed, fabricated rules about everything from how to wash your hands to how to enter a bathroom. It keeps people so busy arguing about the tiny details that they completely miss the big picture. They miss the map.
This connects everything back to the geography. If you control the books, you control the map.
And if you control the map, you control the path to salvation. Which leads us directly to Section 6, the true Hajj and salvation.
Right. Because this is the logical conclusion of everything we've discussed. If Bakkah is Jerusalem, then the Hajj, the great pilgrimage, has been fundamentally diverted.
Dr. Waleed is very explicit and direct on this point. He states that the true sanctuary, the Masjid al-Haram, is in Jerusalem. Therefore, the true pilgrimage, the Hajj, should be to Jerusalem.
And this ties into his interpretation of salvation itself, right? The concept of Khalis al-Dar.
Yeah.
We usually think of sincerity, ikhlas, as just a feeling in your heart. You know, I sincerely believe in one God.
It's usually seen as an internal, abstract state. But Dr. Waleed, true to form, adds a locational dimension to it. He analyzes Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is often called the chapter of sincerity or purity.
And what does he find?
He argues that to be mukhlis, to be truly sincere or pure, is not just to believe in your heart, but to physically and spiritually direct yourself solely to the Dar al-Salam.
House of Peace, Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. So sincerity is tied to geography. Purity is tied to direction.
So you could call it locational monotheism.
That's a fantastic term for it, yes. It's not just I believe in one God. In this framework, it's I believe in one God and I turn to his one true house.
And the inverse of that?
The inverse is that looking for salvation elsewhere, specifically, in his view, in the desert of Mecca, is considered a form of polytheism, shirk.
That's a very strong statement. How can making a pilgrimage be considered polytheism?
Because in this framework, you are validating a false sanctuary, a decoy. You are turning your back on the true Dar al-Salam, House of Peace, and instead directing your worship towards a place he identifies with punishment and historical distortion.
So you're associating a partner with God, not a statue, but a location.
A false location. You're giving a created place a holy status that belongs only to God's chosen first house. He warns that this is a critical soul-endangering error. He sees the current Hajj as practiced as a trap.
It's incredibly heavy stuff. It completely redefines what it means to be faithful in his view. Which brings us to the who. Who is behind this grand distortion? The source material is very specific about the antagonist in this long historical drama.
Yes, Section 7, the Israelite influence. And we need to be very careful and clear here in how we explain Dr. Waleed's use of the term Bani Israel, or the children of Israel.
Right. It's crucial to state that he is not talking about a modern nation-state in a political sense. This isn't about contemporary geopolitics. He's using it as a historical and theological category.
Correct. In his writings, he describes them as an ancient, recurring group. He uses the Quranic term, the malicious tree, to describe this influence. He sees them as the architects of this entire distortion of the original code of mercy.
And he gives a very specific warning against marriage. But not the kind of marriage you're thinking of.
No, not a wedding. He warns against intellectual marriage. He says very pointedly, don't marry their thoughts.
That's a vivid metaphor. Don't marry their thoughts. What does that mean?
He argues that consuming these Israelite thoughts, which for him is a category that includes the Mishnah's blacklist structure, the distorted geography, the fabricated hadiths, is like marrying into a corrupt family. It changes you.
How does it change you?
It turns, in his words, a believing Arab into a hypocritical Bedouin or an Arab.
Arab. That's another specific Quranic distinction, isn't it?
It is. The Quran makes a clear distinction between Arabs, who can be believers, and Arab Bedouins, or nomads, who are often criticized for their deep-seated hypocrisy and disbelief.
So Dr. Waleed maps this onto the intellectual landscape.
Yes. If you consume the distorted ideas, you lose your spiritual stability. You become a nomad of the soul. You abandon your true house in Jerusalem and are left wandering in a desert of confusion.
And he connects the figures of Gog and Magog to all this as well.
He does. He identifies Gog and Magog not as some mythical creatures trapped behind a physical wall, but as specific factions of these historical Israelite groups.
So they're human groups.
Human groups whose function is to hide the truth and to spread corruption on earth. In his view, they are the active agents in history who facilitated and maintained this great geographical shift. They are the ones who moved the map and then hid it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take a breath here, because we have unpacked a huge amount of information.
They certainly have.
We've gone from the geometry of the soul, that three-ringed target of mercy, confusion, and anger, all tied to how you treat your parents. We've decoded the language, how Rahim and Rajim are mirrored opposites, and how an English phrase like feeling blue might be a universal Quranic concept.
We explored the ring of salt as a corruption of the ring of prayer.
We've completely shifted the map of the world, moving the Holy Land from Mecca back to Jerusalem, or Baka, the Crying Land.
And we've uncovered what the source calls the blacklist, that ancient mechanism of Mishnah and Takfir used for centuries to control the narrative and enforce compliance.
It is a massive, sweeping, and all-encompassing theory of everything.
It really is. What stands out most to me when you try to synthesize all of Dr. Waleed's work is this aha moment you have regarding the nature of control.
What do you mean by that?
The realization that, according to this source, tools like excommunication in Christianity or takfir in Islam aren't just arcane religious debates. They are ancient, continuously updated tools of political and spiritual control. And their primary purpose in this framework is to keep people away from the true sanctuary.
It portrays history as a massive, ongoing cover-up operation.
An operation to divert humanity away from the House of Peace and keep them lost in the desert, arguing about details.
It makes you look at the map differently. It certainly makes you look at language differently.
It does. It suggests that nothing, not a word, not a location, not a tradition, is accidental.
And on that note, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. We talked about feeling blue and blacklisting. Dr. Waleed argues these everyday idioms are like linguistic fossils that preserve forgotten theological truths.
Right. They're artifacts hiding in plain sight.
So here is the provocative thought for you today. If language preserves this kind of history, what other idioms do we use every single day? What other phrases are we just tossing around in casual conversation that might hold the keys to forgotten spiritual or historical truths?
That is a fascinating question to ponder. Are we speaking the remnants of ancient history every time we use a slang term or a common phrase? What else is buried in our vocabulary?
Something to mull over on your drive home. I want to say a huge thank you to the source for today's dive, Dr. Khaled Waleed and the Almighty Covenant, or Mithaq al-Khalek YouTube channel. This deep dive was based entirely on his insights and his textual analysis.
His work is definitely something that, regardless of where you land, forces you to think and question.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, for keeping an open mind, and for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the next deep dive.